What is up, and welcome to the newest edition of the Lakers Theory podcast. A lot to talk about because it's been 2 weeks since our last podcast. I'm your host, Shane Jackson. Joined with me, as always, is Austin Case. It has been 2 weeks since we did the last pod. There was a lot of stuff that was going on in between then. A lot of big news for the Lakers. LeBron, AD, being here for multiple years, and we'll get into all of that. It was a big week for the Lakers. But I wanted to start with the reason why it wasn't the best week ever. And it's because our friend Austin, the co-host here, had a very feeble quest to getting a PS5 the past 14 days, which is probably why we didn't record the podcast, if you were being totally honest. Austin, will you tell the people what has gone into trying to get a PS5 and why you have not been able to get one?
Well, I honestly have no idea why I can't get one. It's impossible for some reason. And, it's late nights. I think I've stayed up to at least midnight for the past 2 weeks. A couple nights it's gone into 3 a.m. I stayed up to 3 a.m. one night. And all of this because I follow Twitter accounts that are PS5 stock updates. And not one of them was correct for the supposed drops. And so I'm losing sleep, struggling at work just because I'm so tired for nothing. Like I can't even be happy about it because I still don't have one. But I got invited to this group on Discord. I've never heard of Discord before, and it's just a bunch of people looking for PS5s, and a handful of them have been able to get one. So there's still hope. But so far, it's been very disappointing.
I want you to understand how sad that is. I only gave you about a minute or so to talk about it, and it's pathetic. You have to know this. You're talking about staying up until 3 a.m. You're talking about following random Twitter accounts for the releases. You're talking about joining a Discord, which you didn't even know existed, all for a system that you currently do not have, and that there are 4 other versions of this system that you could have. It is completely sad.
It's really wild. Like I wasn't expecting it to be this difficult, and so I don't know why it's so hard. I think COVID is probably a big factor. Maybe they're not able to have as many workers getting these put up. So, but I'll keep trying until I get one.
While getting a PS5 is hard, what is easy is being a Lakers fan, especially after this last week. This was a great week. I know we haven't recorded since before Thanksgiving. A lot of that was because, I was busy. I'm not sitting here trying to locate a PS5 every day, but I actually have a real job where I was, swamped. And then there wasn't a lot to talk about. Not until this LeBron AD news that happened, which is really within the last 5 days. That's all this has went down. Was there something to talk about? So this was our first chance to record since all this went down. I thought it was the best to do it together, to do one last final offseason recap pod where we kind of discuss really those 2 moves in particular and just then look at it as a big picture whole, what we thought, how we thought the free agency went down and all that before we really get into the season, because the season is 2 weeks away from starting. We're recording this on Monday, December 7th. So I think it's 2 weeks and 1 day technically. And we plan to record preseason pods. I mean, and previewing the season. That's going to be our next couple pods leading up to the year, where we give off our predictions and hot takes and all that stuff, and say what we like about the team, what we don't like about the team heading into the year. That is the Lakers trying to defend their title from last year. And so I'm really looking forward to those. But I think before we do all that, we really have to talk about these moves. And I thought it was best to break them up individually for now. Then we'll talk about them as a whole here in a little bit. But let's start with the one that really surprised me. Because the AD one obviously was a big deal, but it wasn't surprising in a way that LeBron was. Signing the extension, 2 years, $85 million, which means he is a Laker through 2023. And this one really felt like it came out of left field. Because, again, we were all sitting there waiting for the AD news to happen, and LeBron re-signed basically, or did his extension the day before. Something that, when we discussed the beginning of the preseason or beginning of the offseason, this was not even on our radar. I said, "What do you want to accomplish, Austin?" And LeBron extension was never once mentioned, and I don't blame you at all. Who is talking about extending a guy who just completed his 17th year in the NBA? So let's start with you, though, Austin. What was your big picture, or what was your big takeaway when you saw the LeBron news?
I was really surprised. It was surprising. We never talked about it once because we didn't think it was on the mind of the Lakers to bring LeBron back for 2 more years. So I really think this is it's a big deal. Like, this is kind of LeBron in a way saying that he trusts what the Lakers are doing. He trusts the front office. And he just kind of believes in what the Lakers are doing, and he wants to continue to be a part of it. And so I think that speaks volume.
Yeah, that was my takeaway as well. We've mentioned now on this Lakers Theory podcast a few times that our fandom is different. You're a lifelong Lakers fan. I came here through LeBron. You're a typical LeBron bandwagon fan. So I followed him around for the last, decade plus. And LeBron, what he has done is this 1-and-1 where he's done these short deals, basically holding his franchise accountable, which there's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to be in a situation where you're on a bad team for several years and not have a chance to compete for a title. He just said, "Hey, you're going to build a team around me that I like. Otherwise, I'm out." And there was a level of respect with that. I thought, I always thought was interesting. I'm always team player in these situations, so I'd never thought that was a bad deal. But this is, like you said, LeBron putting his trust in the Lakers franchise, and that is a big deal because we haven't seen that wherever he's been, Miami or Cleveland. It's been, hey, LeBron on these shorter deals, and he's gonna need to be proven every single year. Even when he did win a title, it wasn't, "Hey, I'm gonna sign an extension and I put my trust in you." No, it's still, "Hey, we gotta stay sharp and keep this team loaded." And so yes, that is the reason why it's a big deal. There is an element to, hey, maybe he's a little older, and I think there is some technicality in contracts at a certain age that you can't extend for more than 1 year after you reach, I think, like 37 or 38. I don't know exactly the exact rule. So there is an element to that as well that maybe played a part into this. It wouldn't be surprising if LeBron, of all people, saw this coming and said, "Hey, I might as well sign now while I can, because in a couple of years I won't be able to." But there was no reason. LeBron didn't have to do that this year. He could have done it next year. And he's saying, "I liked what you did in the offseason, and I like this franchise." And maybe who can blame him if he likes raising his family in California? So I'm enjoying it. It means we are going to be doing this podcast for 3 more years. I don't know if you remember the first podcast, but I said, this was a chance for me to almost chronicle the last of LeBron basically being really good. And now that's another year longer than I thought it was going to be, or another 2 years longer than I thought I was going to be as him, a member of the Lakers. So I am excited. LeBron is one of these people that he defies what we should know about, sports in general. Like, everyone's been, even Tom Brady in football. You call the demise a little bit earlier, and then that player is still really great. LeBron, people maybe in the last couple of years said, "Hey, he might be slowing down," and then he led the Lakers to a title a couple months ago. So I'm not going to believe that LeBron is slowing down and it's the end of his career until we start to see real signs of it. But I'm excited. I hope you are excited as excited as I am, because it's really a big deal.
And I am excited. It's a lot to look forward to, because the narrative was, LeBron had 2 years left. He still had his player option, so he had 2 years left. And so the narrative was AD was probably going to sign something similar, and they were going to try to bring a third guy to LA. But I was low key worried that they would both do this and then they would just both leave, and kind of, as a Lakers fan, we would be back to ground zero of we really don't have anything to look forward to. So LeBron signing this deal, it's a big deal. An unexpected big deal.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that it ends through 2023, which at the moment, high schoolers are not allowed to go straight to the NBA, but that could change by then, which then would be his son potentially being in the NBA at the same time that he's becoming a free agent. So there'll be all-time tampering that offseason maybe on the radar there. I think that's notable at least. Or he might just say, hey, let's do it. Let's do another year with the Lakers. We'll see what happens. 2023 is a long time from now, but it is exciting. It really brings up a point that I've thought about since really the finals is that, I think the whole LeBron MJ GOAT discussion actually is very annoying. And I actually hate comparing players from different eras and all that stuff. And I try not to waste time. Most of the whole LeBron GOAT comments I've made was out of joke for a long time. But what I've been thinking about, what I've been sitting on since basically the last time LeBron won a title, which was a couple months ago with the Lakers, is, this story is not over yet. I thought a couple years ago, maybe LeBron doesn't have a shot at winning another title. I mean, that the last few months has proved otherwise. And I think his story is definitely still to be told. And the Lakers, we're going to talk about it here in the rest of this pod, enter the year as the favorite. He could win another title. And we're saying through 2023, I mean, maybe that's another title or two. I mean, there's still so much to be told about this whole GOAT discussion. And that's actually one of the more interesting parts of it to me, that came from this contract news that I'm looking forward to anyways. Let's go ahead, though, and get into Anthony Davis, which I think is probably the bigger deal. Well, it is the bigger deal in terms of year and money. 5 years, $190 million. He's here through 2025. But it's the bigger deal because it is AD, 27 years old. I believe that's his age, right? 27. He's entering the prime of his career, and he's going to be a Laker now for the next, half decade. And it's in basically his prime. And it's a big deal because when we did this pod a couple pods ago, and I asked you what you expect from AD's contract, this wasn't on the table either. Like, this is not what you brought up. You were talking about 1-1, 2-1, stuff like that, and figuring out a way to scheme the free agency system. And you kind of alluded to it just a little bit ago, but that's not what he did, obviously. He, like LeBron, put his trust in this organization. Is that what stood out to you again about AD? I mean, what was the big takeaway here for you?
Yeah, that's it. This is him saying he likes the direction the franchise is going, and he wants to be a leader in that. I did think a 2-1 or a 1-1 was a possibility. I think a lot of the talk was him aligning his next free agency to match LeBron. And so him not doing that now, that's awesome. Like, I'm very excited to have AD for the next 5 years. This was a big win for the Lakers, and money wise, he only needed 2 more years to be a 10-year vet. And once you hit that 10-year vet, your super max deal is just huge. It's crazy big. And so him signing a big deal now, that's a lot. That's a lot of trust he's putting with the Lakers to continue to build this franchise in the direction they're going.
Yeah, it's easy to say, hey, whoa, that's a lot of money for a guy who falls down on the floor every other possession. No, that's really just a joke there. But it's easy to say, hey, that's $190 million. That's a lot of money, long time, 5 years. But I'm with you. I say, don't let this fool you. This is a win for the Lakers. You got a guy who is one of the better players in the NBA. On a deal that's somewhat team friendly. If you compare his contract maybe to what he's getting paid compared to what other players who maybe aren't as good are getting paid. And like you said about the Supermax and all that, I mean, it's just, it's crazy that both these players put so much trust in the organization right after winning the finals when, we were talking about it, a couple weeks ago, like, there was a narrative, hey, it was a bubble title. And it could easily have been that narrative in players' heads, right? Like, they could have said, well, let's see how it looks coming back. Let's see if the organization's still putting pieces around us. Let's see if we can still win it with a full season under our belt and all that. And AD and LeBron didn't wait. And so, yes, this is a win, both of them signing with the Lakers for the Lakers. And another reason to be excited because, I mean, LeBron aside, AD alone makes this team an attractive destination for potential free agents, every summer. And it makes this team, a clear contender every single year that he's here because he is one of the better players in the league. And you just got to put pieces around him. So, yeah, that's a win. And it goes back to the trade, being aggressive last year or however long it was. I don't even remember. Time doesn't exist anymore in this pandemic, but it goes back to being aggressive by trading for AD and having faith in that situation and saying, hey, let's go for it. And I know there's people questioning like the Bucks and them being aggressive with their trading situation. And that's just the things you have to do if you want to put stars in your team and try to compete for a title. So credit to the Lakers for it working out and being aggressive. And the Lakers fans should be excited because, I mean, even without LeBron, you would have to imagine that an AD-led Lakers team is a force to be reckoned with in the NBA, I think. So I did want to lump them together, which is kind of what we've been doing this whole entire time. But really, it's interesting to me because in this player empowerment era, I mean, this is just two players who are arguably two of the bigger stars in the NBA just putting their complete faith in the Lakers franchise. And I don't think it was that long ago that there were questions about whether or not that there should be faith in the franchise. Rob Pelinka didn't have a resume that excited fans. There was talk, as I will mention here in a little bit, that maybe players didn't want to play with LeBron and stuff like that. And now these guys are saying, we fully trust you. And it's something that's changed really in a matter of 20 months, right? I mean, is it as simple as the Lakers won a title and everything's forgiven for that? Because it doesn't seem like that would be the case, right? Like, given the NBA, I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd just be just as easy. Hey, they won a title. We now completely have faith and all our doubts are erased.
Yeah. To the summer that they brought LeBron on, it was, there's a lot of doubt in the upper management of the Lakers. And, that was a big reason why they just couldn't get anybody to come to LA. Guys just didn't like the front office. There's questions about how the franchise was going, the future of it. And, LeBron came aboard and it really, things changed. I think when you bring someone like LeBron in, he was a 15-year vet at the time. And so you have a guy like that can say, hey, I like this guy. Let's try to go get that guy. So you have a player that has been in the league for 15 years that can, he can make management level decisions for this franchise. Yeah. And so I think that was a big deal. And that really changed how the Lakers front office went about things. I trusted that Pelinka was a good choice when they brought him on. He was Kobe's agent for 20 years. Yeah. The story is that they were, very close friends. And so my thought was, if they're close friends for 20 years, he's got to have this just amazing, thought for basketball. Kobe feeding him just everything that he knows and just stuff like that. And so, I was really looking forward to that. And then, this summer, it just proves like Rob Pelinka might be a genius. And I'll get behind that. But it's good news. Pelinka knows what he's doing. He's got two amazing players, LeBron and Anthony Davis, to help him, see guys. because they're the ones on the court playing. So, they'll have a better view of a player than maybe the upper management and scouting department will. So I think it's a big deal.
And it wasn't, you mentioned LeBron coming to the Lakers. It wasn't too long ago that the narrative was, hey, LeBron's coming to increase his movie career or enhance his, start his movie career, basically. That's why he's coming to LA. And so it is wild to see just in a matter of a couple of years how much has changed. I mean, it seems like everybody has complete faith in this organization now. And maybe that is different if they don't win it in the bubble. And it is as simple as, hey, they won a title, and so now they get the benefit of the doubt moving forward. I don't know. Maybe it is. I did just want to ask, your overall thoughts. I mean, these two signing long deals, I think you've kind of mentioned it, but what is the biggest thing about the tandem signing these long deals for you?
It's these guys believing in the Lakers, and I see it as they see this franchise that was really struggling, and they turned it around. Like it took 2 years for LeBron, and it took LeBron 2 years with the team to make them champions again, and so it means a lot for the two together as players, that they can do that their first year together and bring this team to a championship. And the team, the team got better in the offseason. So there's only that to look forward to for this season and moving forward. Yeah,
I do think I kind of mentioned it a little bit ago, but it was funny to hear. I mean, really just a year ago, and last offseason, they were like, hey, I don't know if players want to play with LeBron. Like he's a tough teammate to play with because he demands so much. And it's crazy now. I mean, as you start to watch these interviews of all these new players joining the Lakers, and they're already excited about LeBron or talking about his leadership and stuff like that, and really crediting. And honestly, a lot of credit goes to the Lakers for embracing this relationship with Rich Paul. Like, I mean, maybe not every team does that. And, there were question marks when the roster was getting filled out last year because there were some clutch players on there that maybe people didn't necessarily believe in. And credit to the Lakers for just embracing their relationship with the agent that I don't know if every other team or many other teams that could have done that, right? Like that's a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, I see the Lakers getting a lot of hate. Because they have guys from clutch. It doesn't make sense to me because at the end of the day, the players have to agree to whatever terms are on the table. And so, if a guy doesn't like the deal he's getting, he's not going to sign it. And so, the agent and the agency in general can get a lot of heat. But, these guys are signing the deals,
Yeah.
And so to me, all the negativity that they get, whatever, it's probably not even people who are within the Laker nation that are hating on them. So it's just kind of you see it and you disregard it.
And we're already here approaching our final segment of this podcast, which I think is important to note because our previous Lakers Theory podcast has gone an hour long, but there wasn't a lot to talk about this time, right? Yeah. Like it's really been all that's happened since our last podcast was LeBron and AD. Did I miss anything? Is there anybody else on the team that we should be talking about?
We don't necessarily have to talk about them, but they did bring back Quinn Cook after waiving him. It happened, I think, the other day, so I really don't have any information on it. And they did bring back Jared Dudley.
Yes, that's a big one.
That was a guy that I mentioned that, I wouldn't be surprised if he was back. So that was really the only thing other than LeBron and AD that's happened.
Yeah. Important to mention that Dudley the other day said that AD could be MVP this year in one of his first press conferences since rejoining the team, which is a big deal because last year he was basically implying LeBron needs to be better on defense, and then the team really bought in on defense last year. It's been said before, but Dudley's leadership and presence in the locker room was very important to that. I mean, it may not have been as big of an impact on the floor, but that's part of it. That's the whole. I mean, you got to get all these guys to kind of buy in, and having a guy like that helps that process. So,
and just I feel like the amount of respect that he gets from his teammates, because you just mentioned, he said like LeBron needs to give more of an effort on the defensive end. Like, this is a guy who plays 3-4 minutes a game if he's lucky, and he can call, the best player in the world out like that. And so, that's a big deal if someone like that can do that. And it just, I think that's why we saw the Lakers be champions this year, because, they all had respect for each other, and they, there wasn't that internal beef that maybe some other teams might have had in that bubble. And so that, that was a big deal. And I think he's an important piece to have back.
I wanted to tease the AD MVP thing because that may be what we get into in the next couple podcasts leading up to the season when we fire off all our preseason takes. I know we are at least definitely going to record on Monday, or have a podcast publish on Monday, December 14th, and have a podcast publish on December 22nd or whatever. The next 2 Tuesdays, basically, or is what I'm getting at, leading up to the season. Those are at least the next 2 podcasts we're going to do. And it's going to be basically previewing the season and what we expect, and then doing our predictions and stuff. And so before we do that, though, let's get one last recap of everything that went down in the offseason and just overall our thoughts. I mean, we've already broken down all these individual moves, all these moves individually in the previous 3 or 4 podcasts that we've done. So let's look at this as a whole now that we've seen the roster take shape, because I know we mentioned, hey, let's wait to see it finalized. Now that it is finalized, what is your biggest big picture takeaway from how this offseason went for the Lakers?
I would sum it up. The reigning NBA champions are a better team than they were last year. I think that's the easiest way to say it. Now, in a more technical way to look at, they have to play well together. If they want to be champions this year, they're going to have to, work their butt off. That's a short off season. The Lakers have 70 some days of rest.
Yeah.
And so, that's not a lot of time and they have a lot of new pieces. So that's not a lot of time for them to click, but you have LeBron and AD, you'll figure it out. But the big takeaway is they're a better team than they were last year.
And I will basically agree with that, but I'll take it one step further. I think that the Lakers enter this year basically in their own tier. I don't think that's always the case for defending champs. I don't think they always are they're the clear favorite, or, maybe they're one of the 2 favorites. That's usually what it is. I think the Lakers are in a tier of their own entering this year. And there are teams, admittedly, that will strike more fear than others. But going into this year, I'm expecting the Lakers to win a title, which wasn't the case last year. But it is the case this year. That doesn't mean they're going to win a title, because, as you mentioned, the pieces got to fit together in a way, and it's got to be in a different way. And we'll get into all of that and how we expect that's going to happen. We're going to break it down throughout the year as well. But going into this year, based off what happened in the offseason, which is as simple as a summation as you had, which is the defending champs got better, based off all of that, the Lakers, I think, are clearly the favorite entering the year to win a title. And that's exciting for a chance to go back-to-back. And it could be a very interesting season and a very timely time to start a Lakers podcast, because it's going to be one heck of a ride, I think. I don't know if it would have been as special last year doing a podcast with the giant break in between the season and the bubble. But this will be really special, I think.
I'm excited. I try not to get too much into they're going to repeat stuff, because I don't want to be let down. But I do agree with you. I feel like they're above everybody. But but we have to see that.
Yeah. Could change in a matter of months, but
yeah, they could play 3 games and I might be like, there's no way these guys are winning the championship. And it's going to be an exciting season. I hope we get to have a normal season for how normal as it can be.
Well, once again, we will preview whatever that season's going to look like in the next couple weeks with at least 2 podcasts, maybe more, depending on how much we actually want to talk before the season starts. And then once the season gets going, we're going to have a bunch of podcasts, at least once per week, maybe more, recapping Lakers basketball. And Austin will give up on the team if they're 1-2, as you just heard him say. But for all those updates on when our podcasts are out and all that stuff, just follow us on social media. It's Lakers Theory on every social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. And we'll try to keep you posted as much as possible. But I think we'll have a better schedule once the season starts and we're able to get underway, because basically anytime they're playing it, we're going to talk about it. So that's really, it's an easy schedule to have when it's as simple as that. Any final thoughts, Austin, or are we ready to go?
I don't have anything. It was a pretty boring 2 weeks, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. Hence why it's been 2 weeks, and we had a half as shortest podcast as we've had compared to a previous podcast. Most other podcasts will probably be a little bit longer than this. But that's going to do it for now. We're going to at least be back next week. So for Austin Case, I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.